During the Vietnam War, an American soldier stood out for reasons that no one could fully explain. Michael Shriver, a member of the Special Forces, was described as unpredictable, aggressive, and completely immune to fear. His comrades nicknamed him Mad Dog. His behavior in combat generated respect, fear, and silence. The official records are brief. The missions he led, classified. His figure remained between reality and military legend. Some considered him a symbol of absolute determination. Others, a warning about what war can do to a man. Who was really Michael Shriver? What made him the most feared soldier of the conflict? And why is their history still marked by mystery? The Silence and the Forge, Birth of a Faceless Soldier. Michael Shriver was born in the autumn of 1941 in Defuniak Springs, a small town in the northwest of Florida, surrounded by pine forests, reddish dirt roads, and wooden houses separated by wide spaces. It was a community established around work, the church, and the local school. In that rural environment where routine equaled security began the story of a man who decades later would be known within the United States Army as one of its most enigmatic operators. His family belonged to the working class. The father, Dale Leroy Shriver, had served in the Second World War and, after his return, worked in different trades, adjusting to the economic fluctuations of the post-war country. The mother, Dorothy Madeline Horver, managed the household and took care of the children. They did not live in poverty, but neither in abundance. In mid-20th century Florida, austerity was more a norm than a necessity. The Shriver home was peaceful, orderly, and unpretentious. The example of the father deeply impacted the child. He was not a man of words, but of restrained gestures. The medals kept in a drawer, and the punctuality of his actions replaced any heroic tale. In that atmosphere, Jerry learned that discipline was a form of balance. At home, they did not talk about emotions, but about duty and work. Paternal authority was not imposed with rigidity, but with constancy. The son absorbed that structure without resistance. He understood that stability depended on control. During his childhood, Shriver displayed regular behavior. His teachers described him as a quiet and punctual student, observant, not very participatory in games, but attentive and correct. He showed neither enthusiasm nor rejection. He complied. In the school years, his silence did not arouse suspicion or concern. He was simply a serious child in an environment that valued sobriety. He went unnoticed, and in that invisibility he found comfort. Upon reaching adolescence, his tendency towards isolation became more noticeable. He preferred to walk alone along the forest paths rather than attend gatherings or parties. He could disappear for hours and return at dusk without offering explanations. He showed no conflict or seeking of attention. His silence was not a barrier, but a habit. In his room, he maintained strict order. Objects aligned, tools clean, clothes perfectly folded. He did not do this out of vanity, but out of logic. Routine was his natural way of understanding his surroundings. In the small village library, he began to take an interest in technical manuals and geography books. He read about mechanisms, maps, ecosystems, and natural structures. He avoided fiction and politics. What attracted him was functionality, how a body moved under pressure, how a system was organized. He underlined with precision, without making comments. That study method foreshadowed the mindset he would apply to the military field many years later. Understand before acting. During the 1950s, the United States experienced a period of economic expansion. In the southern towns, changes came slowly. Families maintained values of work, religion, and obedience. In that context, Shriver's reserve was not remarkable. In its environment, silence was synonymous with maturity. Its methodical character went unnoticed among men accustomed to routine. The relationship with his father was maintained within a pattern of respect without dialogue. The war veteran represented order and experience. He did not offer advice, but his presence was enough as a guide. The son learned by observing, not asking. In that mute correspondence, the idea that strength did not require words was consolidated. When he finished school, Shriver tried to attend university studies, but soon dropped out. He found no meaning in academic life or in social relationships. He returned to his village and worked in minor jobs. He fulfilled without complaining, without seeking promotion. He did not need external recognition. The work structure, simple and predictable, was sufficient for him. At the beginning of the 1960s, the international context changed. The Cold War and the echoes of the conflict in Korea once again placed military service at the center of public life. In a home marked by military discipline, the uniform represented order, not ambition. In this context, enlisting was a natural decision. There are no records of family influence or emotional motivations. He simply presented himself at the recruitment office and signed. The transition was quick and without resistance. Civilian life did not hold him. The military offered structure. He was assigned to the Basic Training Center at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. The purpose of the course was simple: replace individual initiative with collective discipline. For many recruits, the process was shocking. For Shriver, it was logical. He obeyed without question, complied without delay. The same words appear in his instructor's reports: serious, efficient, reserved. He needed no verbal encouragement nor showed fatigue. His performance was consistent and steady. After completing basic instruction, he moved on to advanced infantry training. There he learned precision shooting, squad tactics, and prolonged movements. His technical performance placed him among the best in his group. He never celebrated results or discussed them. He executed each task with accuracy and moved on to the next objective. That constant attitude earned him the trust of his superiors. In 1961, he volunteered for the airborne course at Fort Benning, Georgia. Paratrooper training required self-control and fear resistance. Shriver completed each jump without hesitation. The instructors noted that his physiological pace remained stable even during the most demanding maneuvers. His silence became a tool. The absence of emotional reactions made him more precise. He earned his paratrooper wings and was assigned to the 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles. Life in the division consolidated his discipline. The days included marches with a full load, simulated assaults, and nighttime operations. Shriver stood out for his physical endurance and concentration. During breaks, he avoided socializing. He stayed back, cleaning his equipment or reviewing manuals. He had no visible personal ties or leisure habits. The military routine replaced any external need. Order had become his balance. In 1962, he applied to join the Army Special Forces, the Green Berets. The selection process at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, evaluated both physical strength and mental stability. The candidates were subjected to extended marches, sleep deprivation, and leadership exercises under pressure. Shriver completed each stage without difficulty or mood variations. He did not ask for rest, nor did he seek approval. His response to fatigue was silence. Psychological reports described him as difficult to read, with flat emotions, without impulsivity or affective dependency. During the specialization program, he received instruction in demolition, communications, first aid, and languages. He learned basic Vietnamese and Lao vocabulary, along with notions of French. In the survival phases, he spent entire days in forests without logistical support, completing each test with precision. The instructors concluded that his level of adaptation to isolation was unusually high. Where others showed exhaustion, he maintained the same pace. Upon graduating, he was assigned to the newly created 5th Special Forces Group, Airborne. The unit operated in small teams, focused on unconventional warfare. There, Shriver found his ideal environment: clear hierarchies, measurable objectives, and absence of distractions. His superiors considered him a reliable, precise, and silent operator. He required no correction or supervision. In the administrative reports, a repeated observation appeared: executes without delay, minimal communication, consistent results. Between 1963 and 1965, He participated in jungle training programs, demolition, and night combat. In Panama, he learned navigation and survival techniques in tropical climates. At Fort Bragg, he perfected the handling of explosives and the leadership of small units. He never received sanctions or public recognitions. He did not seek them. Effectiveness was his only language. In simulated exercises, he assumed command with a low voice and precise orders. He did not appeal to motivation. He applied the regulations with precision. By then, his transformation was complete. What had been a reserved character had become a functional system. The army had not shaped him. It had only organized what was already in him: the need for structure, the preference for silence, and the ability to act without doubt. In 1965, when the conflict in Vietnam began to intensify, the 5th Group was designated to deploy units in Southeast Asia. In the selection records, Shriver's name was among the first. He was prepared for a war that suited his way of existing. In the shadow of war, rise of the invisible man of the SOG. In the year 1966, Jerry Michael Shriver was deployed to Southeast Asia as a member of the 5th Group of Airborne Special Forces. By then, the Vietnam War had ceased to be a limited operation. The United States maintained a massive troop deployment, and the conflict extended beyond the recognized borders. Laos and Cambodia remained officially outside the theater of operations, but they were an essential part of the enemy's logistical system. In those territories, a covert organization created by the Military Assistance Command in Vietnam operated the Studies and Observations Group, known by its initials MACV-SOG. The SOG did not operate under conventional combat rules. Its function was to carry out secret missions of reconnaissance, sabotage, and intelligence gathering in territory controlled by the enemy. Its existence within the military structure was almost invisible. Official documents omitted names, locations, and outcomes. Operators signed confidentiality agreements that prohibited them from revealing any information about their activities. In case of capture, the government would not acknowledge their presence. The covert war demanded total discretion, and the identity of its members was dissolved in classified records. Shriver arrived with the profile that the SOG considered ideal. He possessed the discipline, emotional control, and autonomy that the job required. He had demonstrated the ability to operate unsupervised, physical endurance in extreme environments, and stability under pressure. His training record made him a suitable candidate for tasks that depended on silence and precise execution. There was no ambition for rank nor need for recognition, only compliance. The incorporation was carried out without public announcement. Unlike regular units, the SOG recruited through internal observations. Reports from Fort Bragg and the 5th Group indicated him as a reliable, reserved, and efficient operator. He was summoned to Saigon for interviews with intelligence officers and subjected to medical tests, stress exercises, and psychological evaluations. He passed each stage without negative observations. He was assigned to the Command and Control Central Division, based in Con Tum, in the Central Highlands of South Vietnam. In Con Tum, the SOG personnel adopted different standards from those of the conventional army. Uniforms were modified, insignias were removed, and personal documents were stored in restricted files. No member could carry visible identification. If an operator died in a foreign territory, his file omitted the exact location and circumstances. The operations, illegal in nature according to international agreements, depended on official denial. The men who joined knew that their work would not be publicly recognized. Shriver was designated Operations Non-Commissioned Officer within a reconnaissance team. These units, called recon teams, consisted of 2 or 3 Americans and several indigenous fighters, mainly Montagnards or Nung. His own group was named Recon Team Kansas, following the code system based on names of American states. The pre-deployment training included adaptation to the terrain, navigation without instruments, prolonged survival, and encrypted communications. Each mission required venturing into enemy territory for several days, recording movements of the People's Army of Vietnam and transmitting coordinates for air or artillery strikes. The enemy used the logistics network known as the Ho Chi Minh Trail, a set of roads that crossed Laos and Cambodia to supply the south. Interrupting that network was a strategic priority, but doing so publicly would have violated international treaties. The SOG was created precisely to operate in that margin of illegality. The missions were classified as observation or training exercises, although they involved direct incursions into enemy-controlled areas. Shriver began by participating in brief operations, first as a member and then as a team leader. The initial missions consisted of nighttime insertions by helicopter, followed by silent movements in dense jungle. The instruction was clear: observe without intervening, record without being detected. Combat was only acceptable as a last resort. Radio transmissions were to be limited to encrypted messages of a few seconds to avoid location by triangulation. The operating environment was extreme. Temperatures in the jungle exceeded 30 degrees, humidity remained constant, and visibility rarely surpassed a few meters. The soldiers carried more than 30 kilograms of equipment, moved over uneven terrain, and slept in short intervals without light or fire. Each movement had to be calculated to avoid traces. In that environment, the smallest mistake could mean the total loss of the team. Survival depended on silence and precise coordination. The command reports indicate that Shriver adapted without difficulty. He remained calm even in conditions of exhaustion. He did not request rest, nor showed mood variations. He followed the protocols exactly and made no comments on the completed missions. The information was delivered only to the designated officers. That reserve allowed him to advance quickly within the group. By the end of 1966, he took command of Recon Team Kansas. The team was made up of 2 American operators and 6 montagnards recruited from highland villages. The natives possessed natural skills of movement and orientation. Communication among them was based on gestures, hand codes, and brief phrases. There was no room for speech. In the unit's reports, operations led by Shriver showed high effectiveness in insertions and extractions. The relationship between chief and subordinates was defined by efficiency, not by camaraderie. The risk was permanent. The SOG teams operated in a margin where the probability of complete return was low. Ambushes were frequent and losses constant. The weekly reports recorded disappearances with no possibility of recovery. In that environment, the ability to maintain control determined survival. The command records indicate that Shriver showed no indecision either during enemy contacts or in withdrawals under fire. His behavior followed a pattern of direct action: execute, retreat, report. The confidentiality policy of the SOG prohibited its members from speaking about the missions even with other units. They also could not write personal reports or maintain detailed correspondence. Security depended on absolute silence. For that reason, there are no direct contemporary testimonies about Shriver's operations. What is known comes from official documents and later statements from group members, once the classification of their activities was lifted. The reports of the period describe a routine of constant tension. The Huey helicopters took off from Kontum every dawn, carrying teams to Laos or Cambodia. Many did not return or did so with casualties. The mortality rate of the SOG far exceeded that of the conventional forces. In that context, emotional stability was a tactical resource. Shriver maintained composure even in operations with losses. His leadership was based on immediate execution, without visible alterations. The Massivese SOG was divided into 3 main commands: Command and Control North in Da Nang, Central in Kontum, and South in Ban Mi Thuot. Each controlled specific areas of operations. From Kontum, the teams raided Laotian territory. The missions carried code names that concealed their real purpose. In the administrative files, they appeared recorded as training maneuvers. The bureaucratic cover ensured that the program remained free of any public oversight. The team operated with adapted weaponry and equipment. The uniforms lacked insignias. The backpacks included only the essentials: ammunition, concentrated rations, bandages, compass, portable radio PRC-25, and a limited amount of water. Everything was reduced to the minimum possible weight. The noise of the equipment had to be imperceptible. In case of capture, the soldiers could not identify themselves or reveal the nature of their unit. Official denial was part of the training. The raids by the SOG began to affect the logistical structure of the enemy. The ambushes and mines placed on supply routes interrupted the movements of the People's Army of Vietnam. The response was immediate. U.S. intelligence detected Radio Hanoi transmissions mentioning bounties on some team leaders. Among them appeared for the first time the name of Jerry Shriver. His participation had become recognizable, though his existence remained outside public records. The Ghost emerges, hidden missions in the deep jungle. Between 1966 and 1968, the operations of Recon Team Kansas intensified in scale and risk. The Central Command of the Massivy SOG in Kontum received direct orders to carry out covert raids in Laos and Cambodia, aimed at locating and neutralizing the People's Army of Vietnam logistical points. These were high-exposure level missions, conducted by small teams that remained several days behind enemy lines, without reinforcements and with minimal possibility of rescue. Each deployment required precise planning, complete autonomy, and a tolerance for isolation that few soldiers could sustain. The missions under the command of Jerry Michael Shriver were distinguished by a combination of technical control and operational determination. The teams were inserted via UH-1 or CH-34 helicopters, which dropped them in narrow jungle clearings near the Ho Chi Minh Trail. From landing, communications were limited to coded transmissions of a few seconds. Reports described that Shriver always followed the same sequence: reconnaissance of the terrain, observation of enemy activity, photographic or topographic recording, and withdrawal by an alternative route. Although defined as observation missions, many led to unforeseen direct combats. The first documented record of Shriver in combat dates back to the end of 1966, during a raid in Laos. Recon Team Kansas had been sent to confirm the presence of enemy transport vehicles. Hours after the insertion, the group was detected by an NVA patrol. In the ambush, Shriver organized the defense by establishing staggered positions and directing concentrated fire on the advance points. When the ammunition was exhausted, he covered the retreat with grenades and ensured the evacuation of the team without losses. Reports highlight his ability to maintain control and orientation under close fire. During 1967, operations increased in frequency and depth. Orders from Central Command prioritized locating command centers and prisoner camps in Laotian territory. In one of those missions, Recon Team Kansas detected a camp where it was presumed there were American captives. The nighttime infiltration was carried out with minimal air support. The team eliminated the observation posts and used demolition charges to open a path to the main area. The prisoners were evacuated in helicopters while the area received enemy fire. Shriver was wounded in a leg during the extraction, but continued coordinating the evacuation until the boarding was complete. For that action, he received the Silver Star for valor. The team's performance and the frequency of its missions caused its name to circulate informally within the bases. The official reports omitted identities, but the reputation was conveyed among pilots and operators. They spoke of the man who always returned, of the leader who requested the most difficult missions and did not ask for reinforcements. His behavior in combat maintained the same sobriety as in training. He did not raise his voice or show disturbance. He issued orders with gestures or brief words. Witnesses agreed in pointing out that his breathing remained constant even under intense fire. At the end of that year, interceptions from Radio Hanoi began to mention an American soldier nicknamed the White Ghost. The communiques described him as an operator who acted unseen and survived every capture attempt. Within the SOG, the nickname was first adopted with irony and then with respect. To the enemy, he was a propagandistic figure. To his comrades, an operational reference. Among the members of the SOG, however, the nickname that prevailed was Mad Dog. It arose after an operation on the Cambodian border in which his team was surrounded. When the air controllers offered immediate extraction, Shriver responded by radio that he had the enemy surrounded from within. He requested covering fire, reorganized the defense, and held the position until all the wounded were evacuated. He ascended on the helicopter cable while continuing to fire at the perimeter. The transmission was recorded and repeated at the bases as an example of discipline under critical conditions. The phrase "surrounded from within" became a common expression among the group's operators. The nickname Mad Dog did not imply lack of control but persistence. In combat, Shriver displayed a constant energy, devoid of exaltation. He modified his equipment to reduce weight, shortened barrels, adjusted straps, and replaced parts for greater mobility. He alternated captured weapons with standard United States armament, adapting the gear according to the terrain. The descriptions agree that his method combined technique and economy of movement. Nothing was superfluous. During 1967 and 1968, he directed sabotage operations aimed at disrupting NVA routes. In one of them, his team placed plastic charges along a supply route, causing a chain of explosions that rendered the route unusable for weeks. The final report declared mission completed without casualties. The actions were evaluated in terms of logistical effectiveness: destroyed depots, disrupted routes, disorganized units. Shriver met each objective with methodical regularity. The operational pace of the SOG was extreme. The units remained on permanent alert and casualties exceeded half of their personnel. Shriver continued to request new assignments, rejecting breaks or administrative transfers. The commanders noted observations about his excess of voluntarism, but his results prevented them from limiting him. The pilots who transported him knew that their missions were high risk. Insertions were carried out under sustained enemy fire and extractions under minimal visibility conditions. Shriver's transmissions were short and precise, his tone constant and without inflection. He requested support only when the situation demanded it. In 1968, during the Tet Offensive, the SOG increased its operations in Laos to detect enemy reinforcement routes. Recon Team Kansas participated in several of them, with repeated engagements and extractions under fire. Reports record 3 ambushes in less than 2 months, all resolved with survivors. Shriver's continuity within the group, despite the high mortality rate, generated an unusual reputation. His persistence in returning uninjured to Kontum fueled stories among new operators who regarded him as a reference figure. In captured Vietnamese reports, there was mention of the belief that the white ghost could not be hit, an interpretation that the SOG never dispelled. For the leaders, the internal mythology served a cohesion function. In an environment where losses were daily, the stories about resistance served to maintain morale. In the case of Shriver, the difference between myth and record was minimal. His record confirmed participation in more than 100 documented missions, with limited casualties and verified results. Effectiveness was measured in objective data. Kilometers of route explored, supply points destroyed, equipment recovered. There are no reports of insubordination or tactical failures. In that same year, he earned his 2nd Silver Star for an infiltration mission in which he held a defensive position for more than 4 hours to ensure the evacuation of an Allied team. The official report describes his leadership as an example of tactical control in critical circumstances. After the ceremony, he returned to the usual routine. He did not accept interviews or participate in off-duty activities. His superiors recorded his performance as impeccable and his attitude as unchanging. The tribe of the Crazy Dog, the Montagnards and the Hidden Brotherhood. In the highlands of central Vietnam, among Kontum, Pleiku and Dak To, lived the Montagnards, known among them as Degar. They were indigenous communities of Austroasiatic and Malayo-Polynesian origin, organized into family clans and distributed in multiple linguistic groups: Bahna, Jarai, Raid, Koho, and Sedang. For generations they had inhabited that region of humid jungles and enclosed valleys, dedicated to subsistence agriculture and local exchange. Their belief system was centered on the spirits of the forest and the ancestors, and their social structure was sustained by loyalty demonstrated through actions, not words. With the progression of the conflict, those mountains became a strategic area. For the People's Army of Vietnam, controlling them meant protecting the passes to Laos and securing the corridors of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. For the Americans and the South Vietnamese government, the Montagnards offered a unique advantage, a precise knowledge of the terrain and an ability to adapt to the jungle that surpassed that of any regular troops. Since the early 1960s, the United States Special Forces started a program of recruiting and training indigenous fighters organized into the so-called Civilian Irregular Defense Groups, or CIDG. When Jerry Michael Shriver was assigned to command and control Central in Kontum, his work led him to live directly with these communities. At first, the contact was limited. The Montagnards were distrustful of foreigners, including the South Vietnamese, whom they considered invaders. Their loyalty was not obtained by orders or material rewards, but by the conduct demonstrated on the ground. Shriver understood that principle and acted accordingly. He did not try to impose himself through rank or protocol. He simply shared his daily life with them. The records of operators who served in Kontum between 1966 and 1968 agree in describing him as a man who spent more time in tribal camps than in the American facilities. He slept in the villagers' huts, ate their food, learned phrases in their dialects, and followed their routines without reservation. His manner was direct, without unnecessary hierarchies. In combat, he did not consider them auxiliaries, but companions. That attitude generated an uncommon level of trust between the Montagnards and the American soldiers. Confidence was strengthening on the ground. The Montagnards were experienced trackers, capable of detecting footprints, smells, and sounds imperceptible to others. In the jungle, those abilities determined survival. In the SOG missions, the tribal fighters opened and closed the formation, while Shriver coordinated communications and fire from the center. The structure was simple and effective. In the operational reports of Recon Team Kansas, a constant pattern is observed: silent mobility, immediate response, and a minimal rate of casualties. In a short time, the group transformed into a cohesive unit. The Montagnards called him Wai Bu Shriver, a term that meant elder brother. In the villages, his name was mentioned alongside those of the clan leaders. During rest periods, Shriver allocated part of his salary to buy rice, medicine, and clothes for the families of his men. He also organized medical evacuations when there were serious injuries, an unusual gesture among American officers. The reciprocity was immediate. The tribal fighters followed him without hesitation. The oral sources collected years later in interviews with Montagnard veterans described the same image: a leader who spoke little and acted first. He did not shout or impose authority by force. He walked at the front and performed the same tasks as his men. In their culture, such behavior equaled respect. To them, Shriver was not a foreigner, but part of the command structure they recognized as their own. Over time, he adopted many of their customs. He slept on the floor, ate rice with salt and peppers, kept the fire burning through the night, and avoided unnecessary light. He learned to distinguish the song of the insects that announced human movement and the smell of gunpowder mixed with moisture. For the Montagnards, those gestures confirmed that he understood their world. For many Americans, they were signs of eccentricity. In the SOG reports, some officers noted that Shriver spent too much time with the natives. However, his operational effectiveness outweighed any criticism. His team maintained a success and survival rate higher than the command average. Living with the Montagnards replaced the social structures of the army for him. In the villages, he found order and coherence. The conversations revolved around hunting and the rituals of the protective spirits, not politics or military hierarchy. There were no speeches, only customs. That environment became his point of reference, a community where action was worth more than words. In 1967, he incorporated a new element into his environment, a German shepherd dog named Klaus, acquired during a stopover in Taiwan. He brought him to Vietnam on his own, something irregular but tolerated at the SOG bases. Klaus became his constant companion. He followed him on the premises, slept near his cot, and waited outside the buildings when he was in meetings. The animal was large, disciplined, and reserved with strangers. His behavior reflected his owner's attitude. The bond between the two consolidated over time. Witnesses remember that the dog seemed to recognize the start of the missions, restless but silent. It did not accompany him to the heliport, but remained at the base until his return. On one occasion, some soldiers offered the animal beer as a joke. Upon finding out, Shriver entered the non-commissioned officers' club with his revolver in hand and demanded an explanation. No one responded. He put away the weapon and left. The incident had no consequences, but reinforced the perception that there were limits that no one should cross. Klaus represented a frontier between isolation and closeness. In Kontum, he was his only personal company. In the villages, that role was filled by the Montagnards. For them, the bond between a man and his guardian animal had spiritual meaning. They interpreted that relationship as an extension of the fighting spirit. It was no coincidence that they began to call him Mad Dog, an expression of respect towards his controlled ferocity and his absolute loyalty to the group. The term was adopted by the Americans and translated as Mad Dog. That shared identity transformed their team into a recognizable unit within the SOG. The operators who observed their methods noticed clear differences: silent patrols, traceless movements, and extreme adaptability. Their strength did not lie in technology, but in the cohesion among men who shared a common code. There were no visible ranks or preferential treatment. Everyone performed the same tasks, ate the same food, and faced the same risk. That equality, unusual in the military structure, generated total operational trust. Shriver also participated in the tribal rituals without interfering. Before each raid, the Montagnards performed animal sacrifices to ask for protection. He attended silently, observing without questioning. When a combatant died, he helped to bury him following local customs and recorded his name in the official reports, ensuring that his service was acknowledged. For the villagers, that action was equivalent to an act of recognition. For the army, it was an administrative detail without relevance. Over time, reciprocity became the norm. In extractions, no team member left another behind. Shriver applied the same principle. During a withdrawal under fire, he refused to evacuate until the last of his men was hoisted into the helicopter. That type of behavior solidified his leadership among the Montagnards and made him a reference figure within the SOG. In the operational files, there is no distinction between American personnel and tribal fighters under their command. That absence of formal hierarchy was unusual. While in other units cultural conflicts were common, Recon Team Kansas maintained cohesion. The reports attribute it to a simple rule imposed by Shriver. Everyone was equally responsible for the mission. There was no distinction in privileges or tasks. With the months, that community operated almost as an autonomous force within the command. The Montagnards regarded it as their protector. Shriver, for his part, allocated part of his salary to supplying the villages that served as recruitment points. It was not charity, but logistics. The well-being of the group guaranteed the continuity of the operations. That efficiency also drew the enemy's attention. Intelligence reports confirmed that Radio Hanoi offered a reward for the death of Mad Dog, equivalent to several years of a Vietnamese officer's salary. Although the information was not officially corroborated, it spread in Kontum as evidence of the impact of their operations. The teams formed by Shriver were identified by the enemy as especially dangerous adversaries. The inner abyss when war consumes man. In the last months of 1968, Michael Shriver's behavior began to reflect the accumulated effects of years of continuous operations. There were no systematic psychological evaluations within MACV-SOG, and medical reports were limited to physical injuries. However, observations from his peers revealed a consistent pattern: isolation, regular alcohol consumption, and a life reduced to the preparation and execution of missions. The war had ceased to be a duty to become his only form of existence. During his stay in Kontum, base of the Command and Control Central, Shriver avoided the rest leaves that the regulations offered. While other operators traveled to Saigon or temporarily left the country, he remained in the operations area. Administrative records show at least 3 occasions on which he refused extended leaves. On one of them, he agreed to briefly return to the United States, but returned earlier than expected, requesting immediate rejoining. He showed no interest in civilian life or contact with his family. No personal letters or correspondence from that period have been preserved. At the base, his routine became predictable. He spent the nights at the non-commissioned officers' club, always sitting at the same table, drinking in silence. He did not participate in conversations or games, and could remain hours without speaking, cleaning a weapon or examining a map. His alcohol consumption did not affect his operational performance. There is no record of indiscipline, arguments, or sanctions. He was a constant drinker, not impulsive. For those who observed him, this behavior was part of his method, a way to maintain stability in an environment of permanent tension. The deterioration manifested in his routine behavior. He slept armed, with a loaded gun within arm's reach. He woke at the slightest noise, ready to shoot. He personally checked each piece of his arsenal and did not allow anyone to touch it. He disassembled, cleaned, and assembled his weapons with the same precision with which he planned a mission. In his accommodation, the space was occupied by military equipment, boxes of ammunition, and tools. There were no personal items or photographs. Everything was functional. Shriver accumulated an unusual number of weapons. On patrol, he could carry up to 6 .38 caliber revolvers distributed among his belt, vest, and boots. Additionally, he carried a sawed-off shotgun, a modified M14 rifle, and, on occasion, rifles captured from the enemy. The other operators considered this practice an eccentricity. To him, it was a system of redundancy. Each weapon had a purpose: close combat, covering fire, or final defense in case of loss of the main equipment. His environment interpreted it as obsession. He conceived of it as preparation. That relationship with weaponry reflected a gradual transformation. The discipline that once adhered to a principle of order had turned into a compulsive habit. In a scenario where ambushes could occur at any moment, absolute control over the equipment was a way to deny vulnerability. However, that same need isolated him even further. His companions commented that his life outside of combat was an extension of the field of operations, order without respite. The nights followed a constant sequence. He finished the day in the non-commissioned officers' club, accompanied by Klaus, his German shepherd dog. When the others retired, he returned to his accommodation, checked weapons and cartography, and sat in silence. He did not speak of return or future. Everything revolved around the next departure. Witnesses remember that during that period, his personal environment was reduced to 2 elements: the dog and the weapons. At the end of that same year, signs of visible eccentricity began to be observed. Off-duty, he wore a dark blue velvet jacket and a black bowler hat. The clothes had no relation to the tropical climate or to military life. No one knew their origin. Some interpreted that outfit as a gesture of irony, others as a way to distance himself. His figure calmly walked around the base, the dog following him without a leash, while the soldiers stopped their conversation upon seeing him pass by. Even within a unit accustomed to unique personalities, his presence was unusual. The image of that tall man, with a pale face, a felt bowler hat, and a silent dog by his side, became familiar in Kontum. He showed neither enthusiasm nor hostility. He maintained constant stillness, a calmness that his companions described as uncomfortable. For the Montagnards, this attitude represented strength. For the American officers, it was a sign of detachment. In planning meetings, he spoke only when necessary, His tone was dry and precise. He neither argued nor commented. He carried out orders with the same neutrality with which he accepted the most dangerous missions. The general environment of the SOG was going through its most demanding phase. After the Tet Offensive, incursions into Laos and Cambodia increased. Losses grew, and the morale of the units deteriorated. In that climate, Shriver's behavior took on an ambiguous meaning. He was a symbol of efficiency and at the same time an example of extreme wear. New operators received informal warnings. Working with him implied total discipline and distance. The nickname Mad Dog, previously associated with audacity, began to be interpreted as synonymous with unpredictability. His bond with Klaus intensified. The dog accompanied him everywhere, even to the planning areas. In unofficial photographs of the period, he is seen sitting next to his owner in the same posture of silent alertness. Those who observed them considered that there was a form of non-verbal communication between them. In the following months, that relationship was interpreted as an indication of total isolation. Shriver remained functional, but his social world had been reduced to a single living being. The deterioration did not manifest in emotional outbursts or indiscipline. It was progressive and controlled. The deaths of comrades, physical exhaustion, and the accumulation of missions formed a cycle without pauses. The war had ceased to be an external context. It was the internal framework of his mind. The veterans of the SOG who coincided with him describe him as an impeccable operator who, outside of combat, seemed suspended in a kind of constant neutrality. He fulfilled each order with precision, but showed no interest in anything that did not involve action. At the end of 1968, his superiors considered transferring him to instructional tasks away from the front. The proposal was rejected by him. He argued that his usefulness ended where inactivity began. The command accepted his decision out of operational necessity. The SOG structure lacked personnel with his level of experience. The war required immediate efficiency, not rest. The final mission, disappearance at the Cambodia border. At the beginning of April of 1969, the Central Command of Mac VSOG in Kontum received intelligence reports from reconnaissance flights and radio interceptions. The analyses indicated that units of the People's Army of Vietnam had installed a new command center within Cambodian territory near the province of Ratanakiri, less than 30 kilometers from the border with South Vietnam. The data were fragmentary, but they agreed in describing an underground complex connected to the logistical network of the Ho Chi Minh route, from which supply and reinforcement movements to the south were coordinated. The High Command of the SOG authorized a reconnaissance and possible interdiction operation. The primary objective was to confirm the existence of the complex. The secondary, to obtain intelligence or capture enemy personnel. Due to the depth of the target within Cambodia, the mission was classified as highly sensitive, with an absolute prohibition on disclosure. The team designated was Recon Team Louisiana, with Michael Shriver as the operational leader. The selection was based on his experience in long-range raids and his proven ability to maintain control under fire. Shriver's physical condition remained optimal, and his superiors registered him as fit for unrestricted field command. The team included 3 American operators and 9 veteran Montagnards. Traveling with Shriver were Sergeant George Brown, second in command, and Specialist William Kay as radio operator. The insertion would be carried out by Huey UH-1 helicopters with an H-34 of the South Vietnamese Air Force designated for extraction. Air cover would be provided by F-4 Phantom fighters on alert from Da Nang. Preparations began on April 22nd. The group checked PRC-25 radios, rations, ammunition, C4 explosives, smoke flares, and personal weapons. Shriver added to his team an Ithaca 37 sawed-off shotgun and several .38 caliber revolvers. In the armament records, his equipment was described as non-regulatory but authorized by operational criteria. That night, according to witnesses, he drank only 1 beer at the non-commissioned officers' club and returned to his lodging. He checked the equipment one last time and slept alongside his dog Klaus, lying at the foot of the cot. At 6 in the morning on the 24th of April, the helicopters took off from Kontum. The weather was clear and the visibility stable. On board, Shriver reviewed the map with Brown. He did not comment on the risk or the nature of the mission. According to the pilot, his attitude was calm and focused. The flight lasted 40 minutes. The insertion point was located in a dense jungle area near a stream. At 6:45, the helicopters descended in 3 quick passes. The insertion was completed without contact. Shriver established an observation position and transmitted a brief message to Kontum. Insertion complete. No incidents. The team moved north, recording tracks, extinguished campfires, and ammunition boxes of Soviet origin. At 9 o'clock, they detected structures camouflaged with vegetation. From an elevation, they observed troop movements and an improvised antenna. Shriver sent encrypted coordinates for aerial verification. At 9:30, an enemy patrol discovered their position. The confrontation was immediate. The bursts crossed the line of advance and the group withdrew to higher ground. Shriver directed the movement with staggered fire, establishing 3 defense points. In the radio recording, his voice sounds firm. Multiple contact, possible battalion, request priority extraction. The rescue helicopters would take at least 20 minutes to arrive. During that interval, enemy pressure increased. The heavy machine guns and mortars began to close the perimeter. Interference made transmissions difficult. Operator K was wounded in one leg, but continued transmitting. Shriver reorganized the line, alternating fire between flanks to contain the advance. At 9:52, he made his last full transmission. "We are surrounded. We will hold out until they arrive. I request friendly fire on the outer perimeter." The air controller confirmed the message and coordinated napalm cover attacks less than 200 meters from the estimated position. The extraction helicopter pilot, Captain Nguyen Van Son, recounted that upon arriving in the area, the smoke impeded visibility. They managed to identify 2 figures among the trees. One of them, presumably Shriver, was shooting a shotgun northward. When the helicopter descended, a nearby explosion forced it to ascend. The captain observed that the man on the ground raised his hand, indicating they should withdraw. That was the last time he was seen alive. Enemy fire forced the helicopters to retreat. The F-4 fighters made several bombing runs to cover the withdrawal. The transmissions from the ground ceased. During the following hours, the radio channel remained silent. That same afternoon, an attempt at rescue was organized. 3 helicopters returned with armed escort. They found burnt vegetation, fragments of equipment, and traces of blood, but no bodies. 4 members of the team were located several hundred meters away, wounded and disoriented. The others, including Shriver, did not appear. The survivors reported that he had covered the retreat, staying at the rear. They claimed to have seen him shoot until he ran out of ammunition and used grenades before the bombardment. None could return to the exact point due to airfire. The official report of Macy v. Sog, dated the 26th of April, classified Jerry Michael Shriver as missing in action. The document summarized the operation with administrative language: significant enemy contact, incomplete extraction, unconfirmed objective. During the following days, new search attempts were made, all repelled by North Vietnamese forces. The area remained under enemy control for weeks. In the following months, multiple versions about his fate emerged. Some prisoners released years later mentioned having heard about a tall American captured in Cambodia and transferred to Laos. None could confirm it. Intelligence analysts reviewed the statements but found no conclusive evidence. Flight records, recordings and testimonies agree that the disappearance occurred between 9:50 and 10 in the morning on the 24th of April of 1969. After that time, no signals were recorded. The area was extensively bombed, making the recovery of remains or material impossible. In Kontum, the news spread quickly. The Montagnards, who had served under his command, organized a brief ceremony. They drove a spear into the ground, covering it with a piece of blue cloth, and buried a stone with his name. They did not speak of rescue or revenge. To them, Shriver had returned to the jungle. Klaus, his dog, stayed at the base for several weeks. The soldiers fed him and watched him roam near the helicopter pads. Over time, he began to follow the aircraft during takeoffs. One morning, he disappeared. He was not recorded in inventories or official reports. Shriver's file was provisionally closed in 1974, with status presumed dead in combat. No identifiable remains were recovered. On the Wall of the Fallen in Washington, D.C., his name appears on panel 26W, line 34. Declassified Macy v. SOG documents confirm that the Cambodia mission represented one of the most extreme limits of the clandestine operations program. It was a war that operated outside the official geography. Shriver, who had lived on that margin, disappeared within it. There was no public ceremony nor official statement. His name was recorded in an administrative paragraph and his story reduced to a date and a code. In the SOG bases, his absence was not commented on. The helicopters continued taking off from Kontum with new teams and new coordinates. But the exact point where Jerry Michael Shriver disappeared was left off the maps. In the mission records, only the coordinates remain that place him in a nameless location, Oscar 85, Cambodia. The last known broadcast preserves her voice unaltered. "We will hold out until they arrive."